Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.
Everyone, it is wonderful to see this many people interested in the Benn High redevelopment project. This is wonderful. So welcome to this special meeting of the Bennington Select Board. It is Wednesday, October 19th, 2022, and this is a public presentation to discuss the feasibility of the Benn High redevelopment project. So I am Jeannie Jenkins. I have the pleasure of chairing the Select Board, and I'm going to ask my fellow Select Board members to introduce themselves.
I'm Gary Corey.
Hi, Tom Haley.
Good evening, I'm Jim Carroll.
Jean Connor.
Good evening, Bruce Lee Clark.
Wonderful. We also have with us, we have Cat TV on the camera tonight, and we are live, which is wonderful. And we have Nancy Lively, who always takes excellent minutes for us. And we have Jonah Spivak is on the technology, and I think the other individuals that are here tonight will introduce themselves. So the process for tonight is as follows. First, we're going to have a public presentation that covers all aspects of the project by the individuals who are responsible for those various elements of the project. Then we're going to have a formal question and answer period. And people that have signed up, I will call you first, and then anyone else that wants to speak or ask a question or make a comment is welcome to raise their hand, and we will call on you. The way this is going to work is that everyone will have 3 minutes to ask their question or comment. Jean is going to be the timekeeper, and she will let you know when you get close to your 3 minutes. Please address your questions to the individual, to our guests, our speakers tonight, and please keep the focus on the Benn High project. Once you've made your comment, there are microphones up here for you to come up, and you have to, just so you know, you have to speak into the microphone really closely so that we can all hear. Once you've made your comment, we'll ask you to please sit down, and then the appropriate person will get up and answer your question. So we'll do formal question and comment period, and then following that, we're going to do a less formal question and answer period. All the principals that are here tonight will be sitting at tables, one to discuss the design, one to discuss the housing project, and one to discuss the Bennington community aspects of this project. And there you can have one-on-one conversations, look at additional materials, and go from there. So our intention is for this to be to end tonight around 7:30. We will then continue this process if there are additional questions. We'll continue this at Monday night's meeting on the 24th. So I think with that, Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
I'll kick things off. So thank you, Jeannie. Thank you very much for that, introducing our process this evening. And if anybody can't hear people presenting, just raise your hand during the presentation, and it'll give us a cue to speak into the microphone and maybe speak up. So we do know that this room offers some challenges for folks because doesn't have the best acoustics. So first of all, thank you everybody for coming this evening to watch the presentation that we're about to give on the Benn High redevelopment project. I see a lot of familiar faces, but I see a lot of new faces too, so that's great. We really appreciate folks coming out tonight. Let me introduce the kind of the team of folks that will be speaking this evening, just so you know who they are. We'll start with Zach Hale with Hale Resources. He's going to be talking about the residential portion of this project. He's our private partner in the proposed public-private partnership for the Benn High redevelopment project. Shannon Barsati is our community development director, and she knows all about the community space, the community development project. And then Jeff Goldstone who has the distinct pleasure of working both with Hale Resources and the town as the architect on this project. So that was not how we planned it, but it all worked out that way. It's great to have one architect working on both parts of the project. So Jeff will be available to make a presentation regarding the actual design of the project, and also he'll be available afterwards to talk about the design of the project. And as Jeannie mentioned, the town will have a table, Zach will have a table for Hale Resources, and Jeff will have a table for when we do the informal portion. You folks can come up and ask questions, and we'll try to do our best to answer them after the formal part. So kind of a two-part process this evening. So let's just kick things off. So we're here to talk about the Benn High redevelopment project. Just a little history. What was the impetus for this project? What made us think about doing this project after so many years? And it really comes down to the American Rescue Plan Act. So, as you folks may or may not know, is a significant amount of funding from the federal government, about, in our case, $3.9 million total, that came to the town for us to spend. There are certain parameters. This obviously fits well into those parameters, but when the select board first learned that this money was on its way, they were very proactive and very forward-thinking, and asked the staff to work with them to develop a public process to identify priorities. And we went through that. It was a multi-month process. Our goal was to define or identify transformative projects that would really help to move our community forward. And some of the things that we looked at that we found that the select board identified as important is redeveloping blighted properties, making a large impact on the neighborhood and community. And some of the specific things that folks really talked about was indoor rec, especially gymnasium, and really, really importantly, I think everybody knows, housing of all types, of all income levels. So those were definitely identified as priorities, and one of the projects that met the criteria, that the select board believed met the criteria, is a Benn High redevelopment project, because it could meet so many of those goals. And so back about 6 months ago, the select board authorized town staff to begin looking at how we could make this happen. And so that's what we've done, and that's why we're here tonight, is to report to you on the status of our efforts so far as we look into the feasibility of redeveloping Benn High. For a little background on the actual building and the project, I'm going to ask Shannon to come up and kind of explain, give us some background on the building and what our vision is. So, thanks.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see such a good crowd tonight. Well, I'm sure that there are people in the room that could tell you all more about the building than I could, because probably so many of you actually went to school there. That's what's amazing about this building, is that it has so much collective history in the community. So the original old Bennington High School was built in 1913, and it was the public high school from 1914 until 1967. When I first moved to Pownell about 16 years ago, the very first story I ever heard about Benn High was from my neighbor Rachel Mason, and she used to ride her horse and carriage down to Benn High and park it across the road in probably the late 1930s. So then it became the high school when the current Mount Anthony Union High School was built. Then Benn High became the middle school, or the junior high, and that continued until 2004. So when the current middle school was built, the property became vacant, and there have been a number of different ideas for the property, but it really nothing has come to fruition yet, and so it's been vacant since 2004. There were renovations on the building in 1939, 1958, and 1975, and those include the new addition that's now the auditorium and the cafeteria, et cetera, and what became the shop rooms. And it is on the National Register of Historic Places. So current conditions, I've actually been involved in this project more than 6 months. It's been about 2 years. The current owner, Chris Gilbert, reached out to me then. He bought the building, I believe, in early 2020, right before COVID hit, and he asked me if the town was interested in a gymnasium. And at the time, we were working on the addition at the community center, recreation center, and had talked about building a gymnasium there at a really large expense. And so I said, well, let's check it out. So the building, since Mr. Gilbert has owned it, he's really had to do a lot of cleanup because it was in rough shape. There was water damage, there was rubble all over the floor. So these photos sort of show the varying conditions of the building now. So he has cleaned up the gymnasium. You can see in the photo on the upper left there that it has a new floor. You probably could go in there and play basketball right now if you wanted to, but it still needs, a new HVAC system and more cleanup to be usable, but the floor is looking great. And then when you go around the photos, you can see some of the other renovations that he's done so that the building could be utilized. During the pandemic, we had a real need for more space. We all need more space. And so we started to work with the YMCA, who's running our recreation programs, to offer more classes in the space, because currently we don't have the indoor recreation area in our rec center to be able to do that. And so we started with some youth programming, a lot of classes developed for seniors and adults, and it became a space that was pretty well utilized over the last 2 years, even in its current condition. So this photo to the right shows one of those exercise rooms and some of the improvements that were made to, get better lighting and clean it up. And then the auditorium, which was used for various activities, like I said, exercise and youth programming, and also the Bennington Farmers Market moved in there in the winter. And then the final photo sort of shows, with us in it, just how much of the building really hasn't changed at all since 2004. So you can go in and still see the lesson plans on the wall and graffiti that kids have written on the blackboards. But it has so much potential. And I think that's what really grabbed us is, there's just so much space. There's a lot of light in many of these spaces, as you can see. I think this was the old home ec room where they did cooking classes. So this project really is a very unique and probably, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to address multiple goals in one project and to bring an iconic building back to life for the community. So when we talk about transforming Benn High and how the town could use the space, we're really looking at 30,000 square feet of community space that in the old, what was the auditorium and cafeteria, would be a new home for Meals on Wheels with a commercial kitchen and a large dining area, a new office space, a much bigger kitchen and space than they have now. One thing that really we saw during COVID was this, how much more need there was for Meals on Wheels, what an essential service it is to the community, and how much more they are serving seniors and delivering meals. And they need to expand, they need more room. Also, it would give us a new home for our senior center, and that would be all on one level, the first floor adjacent to Meals on Wheels, and the senior center space, which Jeff will show in the conceptual plans, would be basically adjacent to that auditorium. So those classrooms, those former classrooms, would become the new senior center lounge and activity rooms. There also is the opportunity in all of the spaces in the older section of the building, which you see in this nice old postcard, as well as the second floor above the auditorium, would allow for over 40 units of housing, both market rate and affordable, and the space for youth, senior programming, all ages, space behind the gymnasium that could become a new weight room, activity rooms, and it really has the potential to transform the entire neighborhood. So not only Main Street, but Pleasant Street will become a different place with a transformed Benn High. And then there's space for community partners. So when we look at the conceptual plans, the old workshops that face Pleasant Street are not programmed yet, but we've been having a lot of exciting discussions with different community partners about how they could utilize the space both for social services, the arts, a lot of education, and there's a lot of interest in those spaces. So we think we can come up with some great uses for the community.
I wanted to kind of clarify one thing that we've talked around a little bit, but just to make it clear what our thoughts are, what we envision, how we envision this property being developed. It is going to be, if we proceed, a public-private partnership where the town of Bennington really is responsible for developing the community space, Meals on Wheels, senior center, gymnasium, all those sorts of things. And then Hale Resources, Inc., Zach Hale's here this evening, they would be responsible primarily for finding the funding and constructing the residential space. And it's about, like we mentioned, 30,000 square feet of community space and about 70,000 square feet that Hale Resources would be redeveloping into housing. So I think it's important to separate, although it is a public-private partnership, town is primarily funding the community space, and Hale Resources will be finding and securing funding for the residential space. And Zach's going to talk about a lot about that later, but I just want to make sure as we proceed why do we separate the community space from the residential space and those sorts of things. So, and the fact that the town is moving forward on parallel tracks with their pre-development work, which we'll talk about in a minute, with Hale Resources. They're all the same things, the things we're doing, environmental, structural, et cetera. Hale Resources is doing about the 70,000 square feet that they're working on. And Zach may have some comments about that, but just want to clarify that. So, as I mentioned earlier, about 6 months ago, Select Board authorized staff to begin basically looking at the feasibility of a Benn High redevelopment. And we began to do the pre-development work necessary to make those decisions. And again, as I mentioned, there's community space, residential space, and we'll also be talking about funding sources, which is all important, obviously. All right, so this is just some of the pre-development work we've done to date, but we wanted to kind of highlight it. What's not listed here is the first thing we did is we went out and hired a design professional through a competitive bid process. And as I mentioned, we were working with Goldstone Architectures. They were the successful bidder. And they have actually been really instrumental in helping us do the pre-development work necessary to understand what this project involves and what the condition of the building is, et cetera. So, there's a couple of things that you look at right away, and the first one everyone thinks about or should think about is environmental assessments. Are there any showstoppers with regard to environmental issues? And thank goodness, we did hire 2 environmental consultants to look at environmental issues, and primarily PCBs and asbestos. The building is completely clean of PCBs based on air testing that was done a few months ago. It was actually quite unexpected because of the age of the building. We thought for sure we'd find some non-detect throughout the whole building, and that is very, very good news because, as you may recall or you may know, Burlington High School is a horror story about what happens when you have PCBs in school buildings. So we're very, very happy about that outcome. We also had the asbestos analyzed to determine what level of asbestos we have in there. Luckily, the previous owner, Mac Lewis, remediated most of the significant asbestos issues. There's some minor asbestos issues left. We have cost estimates for dealing with those issues, and none of those are significant as a percentage of the project. So we're feeling really good about the environmental issues. No, like I said, no showstoppers, and that's kind of the first thing you look at, because if you had PCBs in that building, we wouldn't be here tonight. We would have already pulled the plug. But we're very happy to say that building, from an environmental standpoint, is in really good shape, given the age of that property. The other thing we took a look at, and one of the other first things you want to look at, is is this building structurally sound? Is it going to fall in, or how much structural work do we have to do? And another, check the box on that one too. We had a structural analysis done and no structural issues identified. So that's all very, very good news. The other thing we did, believe it or not, this is something I didn't understand, but the most costly element of this redevelopment or any redevelopment of older buildings is the HVAC, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. And so we wanted to take a look at, we wanted to understand what that was going to cost, what that was going to look like. So we did hire someone, a mechanical engineer, to look at those issues and help us to develop a conceptual design for what that would look like. And we made a decision early on, just based on the select board's commitment to energy efficiency, that we would be all electric. We would not be using fossil fuels. So we've only looked at electrical systems, and that's why we're looking at heat pumps, et cetera. So we're not willing to compromise on the fossil fuel issue. So it's going to be all electric. We also looked at energy efficiency issues in addition to the HVAC stuff. Building envelope design, everyone knows the better insulated a building is, the less energy you use. So we looked at that. Air sealing, windows, et cetera. So that was all reviewed. A big part of this project was what they call architectural programming, and that's really the architect meeting with all the prospective occupants, tenants of the building to understand their needs, and then translating that to a design. So, if someone needs 10 offices, the architect needs to then figure out, where do those go? How do they fit in? And then if you need, and for instance, Meals on Wheels needs a commercial kitchen. They need a dining room. All those things need to be designed into the building. We expected this to be the case, but it actually laid out very well in the building. We were able to meet all of the prospective tenants' needs, users' needs in the building. So we really feel good about the space, the quality of the space, the condition of the space as we move forward, and we think that all of that is there are no, like I said, no showstoppers. We feel like it's all something that we can work with in the redevelopment project. Again, just to reiterate, residential space, very similar stuff going on with Hale Resources in the 70,000 square foot remainder of the building for the residential space. Okay, so onto the stuff you guys probably are really here to see, which are the schematic designs. And I'm going to ask Jeff Goldstone to come up here. And nope, you're up. You can't get out of it. So as I mentioned, Jeff Goldstone, the town's architect, he's going to talk about the schematic designs for the community space. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the programming needs, et cetera. So take it away. Yes, you can.
Thank you. I introduce myself again. I am Jeff Goldstone. I am one of the proprietors at Goldstone Architecture, and we're a local architecture firm, and we're fortunate enough to have been awarded the contracts by the town and by Hale Enterprises to do the design work for their facility. I'm going to reiterate a few things that both Shannon and Dan mentioned, but try not to be too redundant. The building is a little over 100,000 square feet in area, and there's about a 30,000, 70,000 square foot split between the town's portion of the building and Hale Resources portion. And we will be talking about both of those portions and showing both, obviously, the town, the expenditure of funds by the town. That's probably one of the things most people want to hear about, and Hale Resources is independent of that, so I want to be sure we structure our time accordingly. In my case, I've worked on this building since, well, I first went through the building as an architect while it was still a junior high school, and then I've worked with the owners since then. The owner that tried to make an assisted living facility out of it, and then the owner that was trying to develop condominium apartments in the building. And I haven't worked with Chris Gilbert extensively, the current owner, and now, of course, with the town. So I've been working in the building on and off for nearly 20 years. So I was quite happy to be able to be involved in what I hope is the final effort before it's actually back in use. So go ahead and advance the slide if you would. And I will have to figure out how to point. Okay, great. This is a partial first floor plan that represents the 30,000 square feet that the town is going to be developing. And I'll leave it up there to look at, and you can start getting a handle on the different colors representing different functions in the first floor. But I want to reiterate again what Dan said. The building is in structurally really pretty good condition, considering the small amount of use that it's been put to in the last 20 years, or almost 20 years, and some of the neglect that it was, the amount of neglect that the building saw during that time, the leaking roofs, et cetera. There is one area that does require some substantial reconstruction, but it's minor in comparison to the size of the building. Interior finishes, however, they're in very bad shape, except those that were done in the recent years, some of which may be reusable. They're in very poor shape and will have to be redone. And also the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems that are in the building are, for the most part, going to have to be replaced by the developers. Another big cost on a project like this is the roof of the building, and it is a very large roof, and parts of that roof were redone in the last 15 years or so, and many parts are going to require substantial upgrades. But the roof is currently keeping the water out of the building, and that's great. It wasn't doing that for a lot of the time, but now that it is keeping the water out, we're not seeing any more degradation of what's going on the inside, and hopefully the parts that are not great shape can be repaired and not fully replaced. So the programming for the town, as was mentioned, involves 4 general areas, and they are illustrated in the 4 of the 5 colors that you see here. So if everybody get oriented, this is only a partial plan of the building. The old part of the building would be out in this quadrant here. So this is the auditorium, the stage, and what used to be the cafeteria area and the kitchen area behind it. All of this is constructed in the 1970s, this part. We are proposing to put, let's start with the senior center in orange here. That senior center is approximately the same square footage, a little larger than the current senior center on Pleasant Street. And it lays out, after conversations with the members of the senior center and users of the senior center, it lays out with a number of rooms. And I encourage everybody to look at the boards that are on the walls rather than going through every room here, although I can answer questions. The senior center lays out with the public spaces and the private spaces back in the darker areas. The senior center and the Meals on Wheels, which is in pink, would share this entrance for certain hours of the day when there's a lot of in and out. The rest of the day, we imagine the entrance to be back in here for the whole building, or for the whole town portion of the building. So this is a courtyard, this green area, and it would be developed to allow covered entrance into this point here. And this room would be the entrance room. Everything in green is the circulation. It's the common area of the building. So this would be an entrance where the YMCA, the third of the 4 tenants, has generously offered to have a full-time person seated at a desk here who could tell people either to go into the senior center with an entrance off here, to go into the Meals on Wheels if this door is not being used here, or to go to the studios, workshops in the back, or down into the YMCA. So the YMCA is the yellow. So again, you got senior center, Meals on Wheels, the workshops, and the YMCA. A few other things that you'll see on the map that people may ask about are these heavy dashed lines. Those represent what we imagine to be phases of the construction of the project. They can be ignored in terms of understanding the use of the space. The blue area is the beginning of the residential portion of the project. You'll see on a future slide, the residential is all in blue, or not all in blue. The residential is the blue area and extends onto the first, second, and third floors of that part of the building, as well as the second floor above this portion of the building. Again, you have the senior center, and then in Meals on Wheels, we're reutilizing the kitchen area. That will be a kitchen again, with walk-in coolers, a chef's office, and the offices for the administration of the Meals on Wheels program. And the auditorium we've talked about as a flex space, both the stage and the auditorium itself. Meals on Wheels will utilize that for their dining services. They have lunches for about 60 people a day, 5 days a week, and we envision that taking place in here with service both here and from the kitchen. The stage itself could be separated and used as additional dining space, but it could also, in the evenings or when chooses to do so, use this as an auditorium with the stage opening onto that area for events that maybe Meals on Wheels is putting on, maybe another tenant or some other community member wants to put on in the building. The YMCA, which is a rather large space, is divided up into, well, the biggest room, of course, being the gymnasium. And that, as Shannon showed photographs of, has been somewhat refurbished in recent months. It has a new maple floor, and we hope that that maple floor will allow us to use that the way it was intended to be used as a full, well, a short but a full gymnasium, basketball court, etc. Pickleball, I'm sure, too. And then we have an exercise room here, a small exercise room in the back. The YMCA is making plans to move their exercise equipment out of the current rec center into this space here, and then there's a small fitness room off of that. So all of those would be accessed through a control point here, because the YMCA is a members organization, and so there would be a control point here where members would be able to go through, and then in the back, those are locker rooms, changing rooms, toilet rooms, and some shower rooms, all occupying this large area here. And I know we're going to have opportunity for questions later, so hold them now, but I'm sure there are questions about some of the specific uses you may have here. One question that came up during all of our meetings, and I'll point it out, is that we have a restroom in the senior center. We have public restrooms here, public restrooms here. Those would be utilized by the users of the workshops, the Meals on Wheels, and the senior center. And then, as I said, there's a separate restroom within the senior center. The site development, as we foresee it, will have, I want to get the right number of parking spaces, we believe 67 parking spaces. They're divided into 3 parking lots. The main front parking lot here with an in and out and circulation around the parking spaces. There's a back parking space that's opened off this driveway from Pleasant Street, and then there is diagonal parking off of Pleasant Street behind the building. We also envision a delivery zone here so that we can get deliveries into here, mostly for the Meals on Wheels use in this area, and that's big enough for a truck to back in. Not a semi. Semis would have to pull up here and deliver in. It's just simply not big enough for semis to pull in, but most of their deliveries can take place, and this parking lot can be utilized for the cars, the delivery cars that are going out on a daily basis to people's homes. Other than that, I mentioned that this would be a plaza developed to get access to the entrance to the public spaces and also access to the residential space, which take place on 2 different levels. The public space is about 30 inches higher, so this would be they would both be accessible. This would be made accessible with a ramp. This would be accessible directly on grade. Next. Let's go past this. All right.
Jeff.
Oh, I see. I'm going to relinquish I'll come back and talk about the housing layout. Oh. All right. Go ahead.
I guess I'm supposed to introduce you, Zach, although you've already been introduced. But I just want to say how great it's been working with John and Zach Hale. I've had the opportunity to work with them on another project that was funded through federal funds that come through community development block grants. They were the first private developer, I believe in Vermont, is that right? That actually received a community development block grant to redevelop 219 Pleasant Street. And I'm really excited to work with them on Benn High.
Thanks, Shannon. Cool. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time to come out here and ask your questions and share your concerns or show support. It's important in this part of the process. So I'm Zach Hale. I live on Maple Street in Bennington, and I am the partner and CFO of Hale Resources. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come here and share the vision that we've been creating for many years. And as always, thank you for the support of the Select Board and the community. It's very much appreciated. I'll say that Shannon and Dan have been a pleasure to work with, and we appreciate their commitment to the community as well. So, our vision for this project is to build 17 perpetually affordable housing units in a portion of the building, and then 27 market rate units in another portion, which will likely have 14 affordable units for the first 5 years after the project is complete. That'll be a total of 44 additional units in addition to the town space. So, and then we also have another 3,600 square feet that we're looking to use for commercial space. And we've talked to Jackie Myers and Michelle Prouty about a daycare. We've also talked to the tutorial center, and nothing's set in stone at this point in time, but that's who we've talked to, and we're hoping to make something work with at least one of them. In preparation for tonight, I was reading through the Energizer reuse study, and that was completed back in 2021. And I found a few interesting statistics that I'd like to just share with everyone here tonight. First, that 56% of the housing in Bennington are single-family homes, and only 3.5% are within structures that have 20 to 49 units in them. 75% of the housing stock in Bennington was built before 1980, and between 2010 and 2019, the town's housing stock only increased by 1%, from 6,658 units to 6,723, which is about 6 to 7 units added to the market per year. And finally, seasonal housing increased by 310% between 2010 and 2019. One quote after this info stated, "This is resulting in a pent-up demand that is currently not being met in the community." And this is something that personally I see on a daily basis. I've also seen some other trends since COVID, like a huge need for housing across all income levels, increase in short-term rentals, increase in building costs, and an increase in people trying to move to Vermont, but we just don't have the housing for them to move here. One of the major benefits to this project is that it will add units to the market, but there are other benefits to it as well, such as revitalizing a neighborhood in desperate need, and for not only people in that neighborhood, but the community as a whole. This is because this project will remove a blight on Main Street that all those who pass through Bennington see, but it will also impact the Pleasant Street neighborhood significantly, a neighborhood with probably the highest crime rate in the community. Pleasant Street is a beautiful part of Bennington, and it has some great potential. The major issue is that what was once prominent single-family homes have been cut up inefficiently into rental units and not maintained for many years. Is a vacant 100,000 square foot building in a neighborhood a disincentive for people to reinvest back into the surrounding properties? I don't know that for sure, and I'd be making an assumption if I made that claim. What I do know is that there's a long path ahead, and that this neighborhood still needs significant redevelopment for it to achieve its greatest potential. I've helped bring millions of dollars to this neighborhood over the last several years and contributed a lot of my time to do so. This project will be a huge stride in the right direction. It'll support all the efforts over the years, and it'll bring some credibility back to what was once the most pleasant street in Bennington. For those who don't know, John Hale and I are not strangers to this building. That goes for our development team as well, Jeff, who him and his team have been involved actually before us. Our experience with the property is that we managed it for 10 years. We cleaned it out after it was abandoned by the school, and we've tried several times to bring the project back to life. Our last attempt was in 2018. At that time, the biggest challenge is that, well, even now, the biggest challenge is that the building has a huge footprint, and because of that, it's not possible to use the whole space as a residential a building. This has made it really difficult to get banks interested in the property without having an anchor commercial tenant, and that could use the space for the space that can't be residential. With the town in the picture as the anchor tenant, this project is much more attractive to banks, funders, and investors. That being said, we hope that the town can provide another valuable piece of the puzzle, which is proof that there's community buy-in. When it comes to different funding sources, it's all about entities leveraging those funds. These entities want to pitch in 10% of the project so that they can contribute $20 million to a $20 million project without having to foot the entire bill, which is respectable because these funding sources do close gaps and fund projects that could not move forward without the support of these entities. There's no better way to show community buy-in than for the municipality to put up a large amount of capital in order to show support for this project. And this ARPA funding is a perfect opportunity to do that. It's exactly what this funding was for, really. And from a profit or a nonprofit business point of view, it's smart to leverage these funds rather than spend them on a $2 million project. We could take this $2 million and spend it on a single project and receive a $20 million value for it. However, this project that we're presenting tonight is an opportunity not only to redevelop Benn High, bring 44 mixed income units to the market, and bring some awesome community space to Bennington, but it's an opportunity to leverage this $2 million in ARPA money and bring up to another $18 million of investment capital to our community. $18 million that would be invested into another community if we're not pursuing it. I think Jeff is going to now go over some designs. Again, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Zach. Now we're back to the building I know. We've talked about the yellow, the orange, and the red and the blue zones, as well as the green circulation zone in here. This dashed line represents the separation between the town's development and the Hale Resources development. So we're on the first floor of the building right now. This is the main entrance to the building. This is the girls' entrance and the boys' entrance, as marked in the stone above the doors. All of this is to be retained and redeveloped as housing. The area Zach was mentioning that has made this building so difficult to develop, one of the areas, is this central area. It's about 4,000 square feet, I believe. And it's really not able to be developed as housing because it has no exterior windows or ventilation. So without light and ventilation, we can't make that housing. And something that hasn't been mentioned yet, but should be mentioned, is that we are striving towards an historic rehabilitation of the building. We're looking to receive federal tax credits as well as state tax credits as part of the funding package. In order to do that, we can't cut holes in the building. We can't significantly change the appearance of the building. We can't change the circulation within the building. All that has to be respected. So when you walk through this building in its new use, you'll remember that it was the old high school. And therefore, this area in here becomes very difficult to redevelop. That's the area that Zach has said that he has two potential tenants looking at it, and perhaps one of them will be the right tenant for that space. And they don't, as a non-residential tenant, they might not need the area, the natural light and the ventilation. However, those of you who know the building as a junior high and not as a high school may know that there are big skylights buried in the ceiling above that room and buried below the roofing above. And if it's possible, we'll open those skylights back up to bring a lot of natural light into that old library space. I think it was an auditorium space before it was a library, but as a junior high, it was a library. So the blue units are 2-bedroom units. The orange units are 1-bedroom units. And the purple units are studio units. And you can see there's a distribution through here of orange, blue, and purple. And that is summarized on this table here. Again, when you have a chance to look at these more closely after the presentation, you'll be able to understand better how we're dividing them up. Each of the units has to be substantially one of the old classrooms. So when you walk in the front door, you know you're in a classroom. So the walls have to sort of fade away, so you can see, say, the ceiling, the area, the old blackboards would remain, etc. If we go up to the second floor. Second floor in the 1970s wing would be one of the area that be developed as affordable housing or subsidized housing, I guess you say permanently affordable housing, as well as this area back again that fronts Pleasant Street in the back. That was a 1940s addition. So again, we have the orange units, which are 2 bedrooms, the pink red units that are in this case, they are 1.5 bedrooms. So we have a sort of area in the back, which could be an office or a bedroom for a child, and those could have skylights, so they do meet the light and air or ventilation requirements. The blue 1-bedroom units here and here. And substantially, these echo the original footprints of the classrooms. In the back here, again, we have the 1-bedroom units, and we have a 2-bedroom unit that would be accessible around the corner from here. The other units, again, the blue units are the 1-bedroom, the purples are the studios. And for those of you who know the building well, these are the old language rooms that look out over this roof area. They're up a few steps from the rest of it. By the way, accessibility would be via an elevator. There's been an elevator in that location. We'll obviously be replacing it with a new and modern one, an accessible one, but that will give access to the upper floor, the main floor, the entrance floor, and the basement. And if we could look at the next slide. The basement is substantially smaller as a footprint, so this is a larger scale drawing. But this is just under the oldest portion of the building, and we plan to develop apartments. They're quite large apartments, a 2-bedroom apartment here and here, 1-bedroom apartments here, and a studio in the back. The center area, we imagine, can be used for tenant storage. We haven't designed it, but we think that that's a viable use for the center. And the yellow areas are yet to be determined. They're mechanical areas, pretty much areas that have no specific programmatic use at this point. This is the old boiler room, which has periodically been filled with water over the years due to leaks, etc. I think that's the tour as far as I need to give it now. So people can ask questions or we can review it. I'll be in the back table. We can review any aspects of that you like.
Okay, so now how do we fund this huge project? We have, this is not an exhaustive list. This is really the beginning of a lot of research that we're going to be doing to find the funds. But we have some this opportunity with ARPA that we've never had before, which is really what gets the ball rolling. Also, as Jeff mentioned, historic preservation tax credits, which can fund up to 30% of the project when you combine federal and state tax credits, and that those would be available for the entire building, because even the new addition is now considered historic. Include other sources of funding, designated downtown tax credits. The USDA is the United States Department of Agriculture is actually a great source for loan funding, which would go through the developer, through Hale Resources, because the town to take out any loan would have to go to a bond vote. So this would be funded in partnership with Hale Resources, but those are very low interest, long-term loans that are really intended for these kinds of community facilities. Also, Green Mountain Power and Efficiency Vermont has a number of very large-scale rebates, many that are coming through new legislation around climate. And Jeff and Zach can speak more to those. There are also the Inflation Reduction Act and HVAC tax credits, tax increment financing, which would help to fund phase 2. And there are other smaller foundations, such as the Vermont Community Foundation, AARP grants for the senior center, building community grants through the state. These are ones that we've just identified right now, but we have our work cut out for us to find others as well. I think Dan's going to take this.
One thing that we neglected to mention, you probably are, most of you are probably aware, but All of this information is on the town's website and lots more. We just tried to condense it down. We're trying to hit just an hour for our presentation, but there's tons and tons of information on there, and more will be posted as we gather it. We're going to answer if there's questions that come up this evening that we think are important to have the rest of the public have ready access to. Jonah will post the answers to those questions on the website. So we're going to try to keep you guys up to date on all of our efforts. So it's important for folks to know, even if you don't get a chance to talk to folks this evening or ask a question this evening, there's lots and lots of information on the website, and we'll keep putting it there. One thing as I was going through that maybe wasn't, as I was watching the presentation, that maybe wasn't clear on the community space project. We do envision that as being a phase one and a phase two. Phase one would happen, and then phase two would immediately follow. Phase one would be senior center, Meals on Wheels, necessary improvements to allow that occupancy, and then phase two would be the gymnasium space, locker rooms, changing rooms, and the workshop spaces. So you would see that happen over time with a phase development, which would help us with our funding. So what are we recommending after our work to date? What are we going to ask from the select board to authorize as far as continuing forward or not with this project? I think the number one thing that we would like to request the select board to authorize is for us to continue our efforts to make this a reality, continue our pre-development work on the Benn High project. And in order to make that happen, we think it's important and necessary in order to leverage funding that the select board formally commit ARPA funding to the project with the proviso, so very clear, that no construction funds would be spent until all the funding sources were secured. So we're not asking to authorize expenditure of those funds yet for construction, just that if we do secure the funds, they would be expended. And that will help us, as Zach mentioned and Shannon mentioned, to leverage additional funds, because you really have to show commitment to your project locally and with municipality before you can leverage other state and federal funding sources. So that's number one that we're asking the select board to do, because we do believe that can leverage, as Zach had mentioned, multi-millions of dollars. But without that first step, we really don't see a way forward with the funding. We're also asking the select board to allow us to formalize the partnership with Hale Resources, and what that includes is putting together a development agreement where it's very clear what Hale Resources does, what the town does, and who's responsible for what. As we have already mentioned, it's already clear that the town would pay for its portion, Hale Resources would pay for its portion, but we want to make sure there's clear understanding about our development and their development, and also that's very important to have for TIF bond, which would help to fund phase two. We have to have an agreement with the developer so that we know what the assessed value will be, and how much tax revenue will be generated from that new project, so we can use that new tax revenue to pay for the bond without any impact on the taxpayer. We also would like the select board to allow us to begin to identify cost savings on the project. As I said, we have an initial cost estimate, and we will be looking very hard for cost savings to make sure that we get the greatest value we can for the expenditures. Obviously, we'd like to have authorization to continue to pursue funding and try to formally secure that funding. And one of the things that's that we really need to focus on with authorization from the select board is looking at different ownership models to maximize the funding. As we've already talked this evening, really a lot of these tax credits are really only easily accessible by a private entity, which is why it's really, really important that we have a trusted private partner like Hale Resources to help us leverage the funding from the tax credits and the low-income housing tax credits as well. So that's one area where it's really important to have that partner. And if we are authorized to proceed with that, the staff is authorized to proceed with that, we will be back before the select board and the public in 90 to 120 days to report on our progress and let you know how we feel about the feasibility of this project, which will largely depend upon identifying and securing funding sources. So can't promise that we'll be ready to say yay or nay in that time period, but we'll definitely have come a long way and hopefully have plenty of knowledge to feel comfortable that it would be appropriate to proceed. So that's it. We're almost right on time for an hour, so I'm glad. Thank you, everybody. And so we're going to open it up to questions now. And as I mentioned, this is just the first part of questions. This is a formal question and answer period. But if you're a little shy, or if you want to just have a one-on-one conversation after the formal process, we're going to be available after that, as I mentioned. So I'll hand it over to the chairperson to start with the formal question process.
I want to just ask, is there anyone on the select board that has a burning comment or question before we move this on?
I do.
All right, Jim.
This is for Mr. Goldstone. If you'd come to the mic. Thank you.
Yes.
With respect to the integrity of the roof, would it be strong enough for us to put solar panels up there?
We believe so, but we have not yet hired the structural engineer. He'll be hired in the next phase of the project. The load of solar panels isn't huge, but we haven't done the analysis yet. We certainly have talked about the possibility.
Okay, that's it for now. But
Great, thank you. All right, so Ron Hashi, please. So speak right into the mic. Please state your name and your town of residence, and your 3 minutes are yours.
Go. My name is Ron Hashi. I live in downtown Bennington, and I'm also on the board of directors of the Council on Aging. As you probably know, the Council on Aging has offices in the old mill on Benmont, and we offer a number of programs and services to the town residents. And there's been some recent discussions between the executive director and the town staff about possibly relocating the offices to the Benn High building. And I think if you think about the floor plan, it's possible that we would go in the workshop or purple area. That seems to be available, possibly. So I just wanted to bring that before the group, that we are one of the community partners that Shannon talked about as possibly being interested in the remaining space. And I think one of the points I wanted to make is, as we come out of the pandemic, I think one of the lessons learned is the value of face-to-face communication. And I think with the Meals on Wheels and the senior center in this building, that gives the opportunity to be face on face with seniors, and I think that has a lot of potential to resonate with the seniors that are in the building in case they need additional services that the Council on Aging does provide. So I think that synergy is really important to think about when you think about a possible community partner that may be interested in the space. And as you've just seen, it's a pretty ambitious project, and I'm just going to close by saying one of the funding sources that, or resources that was not listed, was the town's attitude towards the project, which is, we can do this. And I'm a fairly new resident of Bennington, but I have that sense that that can go a long way with the partners and with all these funding sources. So I think that's something to keep in mind with the list of resources, is the positive energy that I'm seeing here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see, Chloe Viner Collins.
Hi, I'm Chloe Viner Collins. I live in Woodford, Vermont. I'm the director of the local homeless shelter. and I'm here to speak in support of any and all affordable housing being built in this building. Right now at the shelter, we're turning away 9 people a day and 2 to 3 families a week, and I'm getting calls from all of the businesses about campers on their property. So I would also urge everyone to ask themselves if the Y needs a gym more than we need an emergency shelter. Because a lot of people are going to die this winter if the town doesn't start prioritizing some sort of emergency shelter. So, affordable housing, emergency shelter, those are the top needs in Bennington right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. Donald Washburn.
Good evening. My name's Donald Washam. Live on Gage Street, Bennington. Been here for 10 years, retired from the Fort Lauderdale Sheriff's Department. My question has to do with funding sources, state and federal funding sources. I don't know if you're familiar of something called supplanting of funds. So if federal money is given out, does it specify where that money gets spent at, and who makes the determination on where that money ends up at? That's my first question. I guess another concern, and I don't know if I would call it a concern, I think there's a plethora of information that we received tonight. And I mean, you know, thank God it's not 10 o'clock, because I probably would have fell asleep. But it's a lot of information, and, you know, to try to stay up on that. And I think, you know, you guys did a wonderful job presenting it, you know. But I think there's still a lot more that needs to be exposed, if you will. Thanks.
Thank you. You want to answer? Okay.
So I'll start with the federal funds. So anyone who's tried to obtain federal funds knows they come with lots and lots of strings, except for the ARPA money, which is remarkably simple to use, more so than any other federal funds we've ever worked with. But that being said, any of the other funds that we're looking for, whether they're state or federal, there's very specific guidelines about how those funds can be spent. There's specific criteria. There's things like Davis-Bacon's laws regarding wages. I mean, so there's lots and lots of strings, and the feds are very careful to make sure that those funds are expended exactly how you're supposed to do it. And we also have to, at the end of the project, be audited by the organizations that grant those funds. So that's the answer for federal funds. State funds, some of the nonprofit funds from the nonprofits are not quite as onerous, but for federal and state, very, very clear guidelines, very, very clear criteria, audited at the end. Let's see, your other comment, and it wasn't a question, but that there's still lots and lots to learn, and that's absolutely correct. We do think a lot of additional information is on our website. We have lots and lots of documents appended to that website that you should take a look at. But yes, we do. That's why we're asking for additional time to complete our feasibility work, because there is more to learn. We think most of that's going to revolve around funding and looking for ways to make this project as cost effective as possible. But yes, we do have to finish design and all those sorts of things. So yes, more to come for sure.
I'm sorry to cut in line, but Kayla Becker, who's our Bennington branch director for the YMCA, has to step out, so she just wanted to say a couple of words.
Okay.
Hi, Kayla Becker. I live in Bennington, and sadly I have to run because I have 3 small kids at home. Part of my vision is future meetings. We could have the YMCA offer Child Watch so that there can be more parents here. But I did just want to speak to a concern I've heard, which is safety. And the Y did run programming there, and I think the more activity in the building, the safer it's going to feel. So I'm not going to speak to what the activities are, but the more that we do there, the better it will feel as someone who, we used it for 1.5 years for Y programming. Also, before I have to go, if you have any questions directed at me, you can email me. don't know the best way to do it, but yeah, I would love to talk to you another time, and I'm sorry.
And so Kayla, would you just repeat what your title is?
Oh yes, I'm the Bennington branch director at the rec center for the YMCA. So the yellow spaces, which would be the community spaces that the town currently contracts with the Y to operate and manage. Thank you. And I'm here for a few more minutes, but I just wanted to make sure that I got that in before I had to run. So thank you guys for letting me hop the line.
Is there anyone that has a specific question for Kayla on the YMCA? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Laurie Mulhern? Yes.
I'm not sure where to go, but I think I'm pretty loud, so everyone should be.
Oh, no, so
you
it's okay.
have to use the microphone.
Oh, it's okay.
So
This one?
right there.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry, I have probably been a little out of the loop, but I have about 23 questions, so I'll limit them to just a few for my 3 minutes. I guess for me, I'm just a little surprised at the scope of this project because as a resident of Bennington, I must have missed a lot of communication about these discussions. Like, I'm not even sure which agencies were approached for use of space in this building. I know we have a lot, like VSL and BPI and all of this. So I'm kind of curious about that. I am on a ARPA committee in the state, not this one specifically, a different one, so I do know something about the process, but I wasn't aware that the town had applied for ARPA funding. And so I guess I'm not sure where we are in the process of that, where that application can be found. The estimates I see that I saw briefly on the site do not contain who provided the estimates, so there's a lot of questions I have. There's a lot of lack of information. I guess I'm just really not sure why there is that. I mean, there's geothermal, there's solar, there's a lot of different, even with the heat pumps, you have to have a backup system because they only go to a certain temperature. So, and also the breakdown of the funding resources or what tax credits are anticipated. Based on the scope of the project, I don't know if there's anything specific on the site. I didn't see anything. So I thought somebody might be able to provide that to me. Also, residents do not have, probably a lot of residents, a printer at home, or maybe they don't have the money to spend on color. And I was wondering if there's an option for them to get a copy of all these documents from the town so that, you know, they have access to them as well. I do provide printouts to some people in the town to give them some access to information, but it's really hard for me to keep doing that as a resident to provide all this. And I didn't see anything here tonight, so that would have been really helpful. I guess I'm really concerned also about the town versus private relationship. Who's going to be responsible for what, including groundskeeping, maintenance of the building, who's handling, you know, that kind of thing, you know, who's going to do the snow plowing, you know, that kind of thing. So there's a lot more involved here.
Excuse me, you have about 30 seconds left. Just wanted to let you know.
I'm working on it. So, like I said, there's a lot more questions, and I'll certainly be happy to provide those to the town or to Hale, whichever needs them, or whatever organization. But I would like to see the ARPA application, if it's already been done, where we are in the process of that. And I would like to see the town and everyone request more input from the residents, because I don't even know where the community needs assessment was done or where that is. And I'd like to see the results of that.
All right.
Thank you.
So, and just so everyone knows, the speaker is right behind where you're standing, so that's why you're surprised when the voice comes out from behind you. Sorry, I should have said that. So Dan?
I'm going to try to answer, I'll at least give you preliminary answers for most of your questions, and then what I'll ask you to do is you can email, what's our email, info@benningtonvt.org. Please send questions, etc. And that's for anybody. Please do that. And actually, as they come in, if there are questions that are unique that aren't already on the website, we will make sure to post answers so that everybody can see the answer to that. So that I think it hopefully addresses the fact that you have lots more questions, because we'd like to help you get those answers. So I'm going to address the ARPA first. So we did not do an application for ARPA funding. ARPA funding comes automatically to the communities based on the American Rescue Plan Act, and it's based on population. And so the amount that we were given was predetermined. We did not have to identify specific projects or anything like that to get that money. We just had to say, yes, we want the money, and we did that. So that has to do with the application process, which there was none, except to just basically accept the funds, formally accept the funds. Now, as far as the process for determining, I think I talked about that a little bit at the beginning of the presentation, the process for determining preliminarily where those funds would be expended is the select board went through a multi-month process where they had multiple public hearings to gather public input and also gather input from staff about what were needs we saw as needs in the community. And then based on the criteria I discussed at the beginning of my presentation, the select board identified several projects to proceed with allocating funds to. Willow Park was one of them. Benn High was the largest one, and other projects include possibility of a skate park. There were some infrastructure projects and other type projects. So that's how that priority list was addressed. Now, most of the money is just allocated and not expended. Although we have expended some funding on some projects, like Willow Park is underway, so some money has been spent on that. But there's still a large portion of those funds remain unexpended, although preliminarily allocated. So that's how that process worked out. You had a question about estimates. Those were done on the attachment on the Benn High website. You can go to the ECI estimate, Engelberth Construction Inc. They're a large firm out of Colchester, Vermont, and that's where those estimates came from. And it's very detailed. You can take a look at those. And if you have any questions, again, info@benningtonvt.org. You talk about the HVAC design. So we did hire a mechanical engineer, and I might have Jeff talk a little bit about this, who did a detailed review of the space and proposed a design or a conceptual plan for what would be needed to adequately heat, ventilate, and cool that space. And that's what ECI estimated, so it's not just like a per square foot cost. We had a real conceptual design that was designed to meet all the heating, ventilation, and cooling needs of our space. Is that accurate, Jeff? Okay. So that takes care of that. So as far as the tax credits anticipated, so the good thing about the tax credits that we're talking about, especially, there's two major tax credit sources, and Zach and might have more information on this, and so does Shannon. But there's the historic preservation tax credits. There's both a federal tax credit and a state tax credit, and they add up to about 30% of the project, right? So that's a huge, talking about 30% of your project paid for with tax credits. Now, only people that can use tax credits are for-profit folks. Thus our private partnership, although those will probably be sold to a third party. There are also, the other one is the low-income housing tax credits. And Zach or Shannon, how much are those? Those are 28%. So another huge portion of your project, adding 30%, 28%, that's over half of your project paid for with tax credits. So that's why those are really important. Both Zach and Shannon are chasing those down, especially Zach. They've already hired consultants to help them determine how to best obtain those. And correct me if I'm wrong, as far as the low-income tax credits are concerned, that's just a matter of meeting the criteria. It's not competitive or anything like that. Is that correct?
There's actually two separate types of tax credits. There's 9% and 4%, and the 9% are very competitive. We're going for the 4% credits, which are less competitive, a little bit more work, and it's not as much money, but they are not as competitive, which is why we're going that route.
Great question about option to get documents. Let us know. We'll print them out. People can come grab them. There's a massive amount of documents online, so just let us know which ones you want. And we'd be happy to print those out for folks who would like to see them. And then super great question about making sure we define Hale Resources is responsible for, what the town is responsible for, and that's what, during our presentation, we did go over it quickly, that's where the development agreement comes in, where it's absolutely defined who's going to plow, who's going to mow, who's going to be responsible if this HVA system breaks or this one breaks, who's going to paint the building when it needs to be painted. All those things will be spelled out specifically, and the idea will be that we'll either divide them by square footage or by primary user, et cetera, but all that will be specifically defined and very carefully crafted so that it's very clear responsibilities between the public-private partner. So that does have to be done, and it definitely is a good question as to how that's accomplished. So I think the only other thing that you talked about, agencies approached regarding the use of the community space. So Shannon can speak to that a little bit, but we're not done yet because that space is not programmed. We just know that we want that space is available and that we want to work with community partners. But Shannon's way more knowledgeable about our efforts to date on that. So Shannon, I'll let you take that away.
Sure. So the workshop spaces, if you remember from the conceptual plans that are on the Pleasant Street side, we've talked with Vermont Arts Exchange about possibly partnering on some of that space, which would be great for kind of arts programming for all ages. We've also talked with the Council on Aging, as Ron said, and really looking to relocate some of their office space and some shared conference spaces with the Council on Aging. We've talked with the Bennington area makers who already have been using the space for the last year at least for their youth robotics club. Also with UVM Extension. You probably are familiar with the Extension service. They run 4-H programs. They also have a small office in Bennington. They're looking to expand and do more. And I think that partnering of an institution like UVM that's really focused on an extension on the community makes sense. So those are some of the partners we've talked to.
I'd just like to add to that, there is a study out there that had community input of what best use for the Energizer building. I understand that's a different building, but that is a really awesome report, and if you're not aware of it, I would definitely recommend reading it because it talks a lot about what this community needs, and it had a lot of community input.
Sir, did you have a question for one of the...
Not for them, I had a question in general.
Oh, well, let me finish with the people that signed up, and then I'm going to open it up, okay?
Okay, sorry.
Yes, no, it's no problem. Judy Beckwith. Judy left her. Oh, she did? Oh, that's too bad. Laura Boudreau.
Hello, I'm Laura Boudreau. I'm a resident of North Bennington, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent of the SVSU. I had to say, when I saw the pictures up here, I went to Mount Anthony Junior High, and I remember standing in the morning with all my friends before we walked in with the two doors. I know where my math class was when I looked at the picture. I had home ec. I learned how to sew a nightgown in that building. All great. I learned how to cook as well. So all good memories. I'm here on behalf of the SVSU to share that we were pleased to see the plans that were shared. First and foremost, we love to see the increase for space, recreation space, and community space. Passionate about the links between movement and learning. We know that our children need spaces to be active, especially during the cold winter months. Outside is important, but inside space is important as well. The expansion of a community space in our community will allow, again, for extension of our partnerships for clubs and activities. So we can just really see some great opportunities for the students that we support and their families. Secondly, in partnership with our Human Resource Department, we have over 750 full-time employees. We are one of the largest employers in this community. Each year we hire between 75 and 100 new staff members, many who relocate to our area from Vermont, Massachusetts, New York, and recently from Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, and Florida. These incoming staff are, again, now new members of our community, and they're looking to purchase and also for rental opportunities. In the last few years, we've seen the lack of available housing become a barrier for us, and it's been hard. So some of the employees that have accepted positions, unfortunately, have had to withdraw because they weren't unable to find housing. So again, we are super excited to see that there's the potential for more opportunities so that we can continue to bring talented staff to our community to serve our students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see. Kirk McVeigh.
So, yes, my name is Kirk McVeigh, excuse me, and I am part owner and manager of 655 Main Street, the building directly across the street from the Benn High project. And I have like one major concern going back to when the middle school was there, and during the winter months we would lose parking spaces to plow wash. I can remember coming to work and not being able to find a single parking spot in my own parking lot and not a single one on the street. And I would end up having to drive around the block, Union Street, or someplace else to find a place to park. And I see that they, have said that there's going to be parking there. My concern is, will the parking be adequate for all the people who are going to utilize that building? It's a huge concern, and I want to know if there are calculations to understand that what happened when the middle school was there is people from the middle school would illegally park in our parking lot. We have no way of monitoring that, but we knew it was going on. And like I said, it was a huge problem. Right now, there are enough spaces, and since the middle school moved out, we have had no problem with having enough parking spaces. But with this coming in, I am very concerned about having enough parking spaces for the utilization of this building. Thank you.
So obviously, it's an important consideration. And as we mentioned, we have 67 on site. We also have an overflow parking area identified. If you folks are probably aware that the town of Bennington owns the green space adjacent to the former Stewart's, and we anticipate that that will be used for overflow parking. We think we can probably double the amount of parking that we show. So this should be more than adequate. To your point, though, we will do parking studies. We will look at needs analyses as far as how many parking spaces we actually need to have. The good thing about this is it is a mix of residential and community space. So the residents you would expect to be mostly in the evening and the community space mostly in the day, but we want to make sure that there are parking spaces for those times that they might overlap. Maybe there's a special event in the auditorium or something, so we need to account for that. Very good point about wintertime. Parking can get limited in the winter, so we would look at the worst case scenario for that. So yes, we know that's an issue, and we have a plan to address it, and we'll need to make sure that it's adequate before we can proceed. But thank you for the comment.
So Ned Perkins.
Yeah, Ned Perkins, Bennington. You've talked about transforming Pleasant Street. I'd like to hear a little more detail about that. How are we going to do that? Especially, and I'm concerned with the streetscape. The back wall of the building is, turning. The back wall of the building turns its back on Pleasant Street. How can we transform this so Pleasant Street is part of the conversation? And, in relation to, say, the horseshoe, and all the, we have an awful lot of Section 8 housing here. Do we want to bring in more subsidized housing into the neighborhood? The town has done a couple of studies. The economic development study back in 2013 said we need worker housing. And the Energizer study that just came out said there's virtually no supply of quality rental units for people making over $60,000 a year. Yeah, these are the needs we have. Jackie Kelly talked a little while ago about teachers not being able to find housing, and Laura just did. That's a big problem. So I'd like to hear about those two issues.
So 17 of these units are going to be perpetually affordable, and 27 of them are going to be market rate housing. There could be potential of half of those having to be somewhat affordable for the first 5 years, but that would still be 27 market rate units in the next 5 years. Hopefully, it would be day one. And when it comes to Pleasant Street, I think this is a huge blight on that neighborhood, and we own multiple buildings within that part of the neighborhood across the street, right next to it. We've invested a lot of money into those buildings. We've invested money on the other end of the street, and as things come available, we're hoping to acquire them and work with them. We've seen other people purchase property on Pleasant Street to redevelop that property. So I think people recognize the potential of this neighborhood, and as things like this happen, we've seen it all over the community. Honestly, like Depot Street, we renovate a property, and the next summer we're seeing that the neighbor renovating their property. So it does kind of spread throughout the streets when it happens, and I'm really hopeful that this will help with that. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but it will add market rate units. It's mixed use, mixed income, and I think that's important for any community.
Just one additional comment about the affordable housing portion, and I'm sure Zach can add. Affordable housing doesn't just mean the folks that are just at the poverty line. We're talking about technicians at the hospital. We're talking about new teachers at SVSU. Some of those units will be occupied by those folks. It's not simply the folks that are in the most need. It's a spectrum from the folks that have the most need all the way up to folks that are everyday folks trying to make a living. And we know that affordability in Bennington is really difficult when it comes to housing right now. So I just want to make a comment about that. And then Jeff's going to talk about facing Pleasant Street, dealing with those sorts of issues. Jeff has consciously thought about that in the design of the building.
Right, if I could get the slide back from the first of the plans. So yeah, Pleasant Street facade of the building is definitely the back of the building, and I think there's no argument there. And as such, we can't make huge changes to that because the entire building is considered an historic structure. So the building itself will look very similar post-construction, except that it'll be cleaned up, obviously. The broken windows will be gone. The disrepair of some of the asphalt will be repaired. The weeds that are growing in there will be removed. So those things will look like it's maintained. We'll also have the ability to have lighting along there, so it won't be dark and quite as mysterious at night. And finally, I didn't talk before about this hallway here. There is an awning in the back of the building that was at some point used as a secondary entrance. We intend to bring that back to life as an entrance so that we would have a lighted vestibule back here, so the parking in the back of the building would have a covered entrance in that location. So we've done as much as we can to rehabilitate that side of the building. But of course, just simply repairing what's been damaged over the years in the last 18 years of abuse and no maintenance or relatively little maintenance, not having the broken windows, not having the glass on the ground, having new pavement, having lighting, we think would add a lot to the character of that side of the building. And by the way, if you come and visit me after we're done with this part of the program, we do have elevations of that side of the building illustrated, so you'll know more or less what it looks like.
Eric, I was just going to talk about you.
No, he didn't. He might not have heard me either. My name is Michael McDonough, and I'm here for a couple of reasons tonight. The one thing that I was going to get Eric on was that, no, I was not a Ben High Catamount. I was a Ben Cath Sabre. So some of you in the room will know the difference between those two things. But that doesn't influence where I am right now in terms of my thoughts and beliefs about Bennington. This is a legacy building that we're talking about. And the legacy belongs to the people of the community who spent a number of years of their life in that building. I was intrigued listening to Laura as she spoke about her experiences at the Ben High building. And because it's a legacy building, we can't let it crumble. And I know that there are a lot of different thoughts and attitudes about what is being proposed tonight. But I think that they're countered to a certain extent by wanting to see that building transformed and become an active, vital part of our downtown. I chair our Planning Commission and our Historic Preservation Commission. I serve on the Better Bennington Corporation Board of Directors, and I have been on the Vermont Downtown Board since its inception 24 years ago. So I really feel like I've perhaps earned a commitment to downtowns in Vermont and to ours in particular. One particular aspect of the proposal is that it is very significantly in tune with our town plan. Our town plan calls for the need for vitality in our downtown. It calls for the opportunity for businesses and agencies to be downtown and not out of downtown. And it calls for housing. And in these three particular instances, the proposal for Ben High really hits the mark. Now, we as a community have great many needs.
Mike, you have like 30 seconds.
Thank you. We have great many needs, and they've been spoken to tonight. What I would ask of all of us in the community is to try as best you can to keep an open mind on this and realize that there are not going to be many more opportunities as strong and powerful as this to bring that building back to productive life. And I hope that we can sort of honor the people that have put all the work into this to stay in tune with them. Thank you.
If I could just say one thing about that too. We're currently looking at Act 250 and whether or not we need to go through it. And I'm sure everyone here has heard about Act 250, and a project like this has to go through it. The last legislative session, they actually passed some laws that if you're in a designated downtown and you have mixed income housing and you have mixed use, which is recreational, community space, and well, those two things, and then you also meet a certain threshold in your population, then you can be an exempt project from Act 250, and you're specifically called a priority housing project. And as of right now, it does appear as though this has the potential to be a priority housing project, and it is exempt from Act 250 because it's exactly what the state is looking for communities like ours to do. So I just want to make sure that was clear too.
Mike Bennett? If you can leave the path up.
Guess I'll use this one. You did this just for me? Thank you.
Just for you.
I don't want to be a skunk at the picnic. I think you can hear me. But I think this needs...
So Mike, would you introduce yourself?
Mike Bethel, Bennington. Although some people would like me to move to Woodford.
and they'd probably pay for that bus. This needs to go to a vote of the people on a lot of different levels. I'm not for it. I'm not against it. It sounds ambitious, but this is not something that the town of Bennington's people, I think, can afford right now. Right now is going to be a tough time. You all watch the news at night. You know the economy is not what it should be. You don't know what the world's going to be like in 6 months, 5 months. I think this needs more rehearsing, more explanations, more meetings like this that should have happened 4 or 5 months ago. And you're going to bring in the TIF. Eventually, you're going to need some TIF money. Well, to do the TIF at the end, after you've started all of this, that is kind of coercing the voter, because they're going to say, well, we've gone in 30, 40, 50%. Well, let's do the TIF. I just don't think this is fair to the general public. And all of you here, I don't know many of you, some I do, but all of you probably make a pretty good salary in this room. There's a lot of people that don't make a very good salary, and they're paying their taxes very hard, their light bills, and you're going to do this with electric heat? I mean, electric? Wow. So I do believe, and also I believe that eventually this is going to be turned over to Mr. Hale. Is that correct? Is that in the plans, that the whole thing is going to be turned over to the Hale?
So Mike, you came a little late. So you have 3 minutes to make comments and questions, and then the experts here will respond after you finish.
All right, how much did I just use now?
You're almost to 2 minutes.
You're almost to 2 minutes.
I got a whole minute? Are you guys going to bring this to a vote at any part of this? Or are you just going to do it on your own and hope that you're going to get a TIF? You can't ask that question either?
You are going to ask your questions. And
All right. How much is the total cost of this thing, and how much is Mr. Hale going to pay for 70%? And why is it that somebody bought a building for $146,000 and we're going to give him $1.1 million plus the senior center, which the replacement value is about $700 and something thousand? So can I follow up on these if I don't get the right answer, or?
Do you have any other questions?
No, that's enough.
Okay.
They can handle that. That was all unrehearsed, by the way.
Okay, lot to unpack there, so I took notes. I'm going to try to get to all of them. So I think the number one point was, can we afford this? Affordability. So that's what we're determining right now. We're going to be back. We're going to be back to you with a funding stream, with a stack of funding sources that we can either say to you this can happen or it can't. So that's all to be determined. Absolutely, Mike's correct. We're going to have more. We're going to have more information about that. We're going to talk more about that. We're going to identify specifically the funding sources. We're definitely not going to start this project without having all the funding sources secured. So that number one will happen, and we will be discussing that more in the future. I have to talk about this one, even though I think Mike was just being facetious. But electric heat pumps, geothermal, powered by electricity, are by far the most efficient heat sources that you can put in a building, and that's what we're looking to do. And we're hoping to get some significant rebates from Green Mountain Power and Efficiency Vermont, which will help us basically make the installation of those systems cost about as much or less than the less efficient fossil fuel sources. And absolutely, fossil fuels are yesterday's news. We need to move on to electric sources. So that's not a negotiable. We are not going to compromise on that. We wouldn't do that to this community. Another question was the ownership structure of this project. So also to be determined, but very likely at this point, given what we know about tax credits and funding sources, this building very well may likely end up being owned in fee, basically technically owned by Hale Resources, Inc., or their subsidiary, but the town will retain control and at least a multi-generational lease, so we will be able to protect our investment in that building. So it may end up technically being owned by Hale in its entirety, but the town will retain control over its portion under some sort of lease or option arrangement, so that we'll have control of that building. our portion of the building. So as far as the costs of the renovations are concerned, and Mike talked about the 70% and the 30%, I think we made it very clear, and maybe Michael wasn't here when we talked about it, that Hale Resources, Inc. or its subsidiary will pay for the residential improvements. The town of Bennington, through funding sources that we identify and secure, will pay for the cost of the community space. That's definitely how that will work. As far as costs are concerned, we don't have final cost estimates for the residential portion. Yeah, I know that Hale Resources is working on that, but again, they are funding that portion. We do have a detailed initial cost estimate online that we talked about earlier by Engelberth Construction, Inc. So that's all there and readily available. So,
sir, did you want to say something?
Yeah, we do have some preliminary cost estimates for the units, and we are at about $250,000 per unit, and it's coming at around between $9 million and $10 million for our residential portion. So we're not that far behind, and maybe we haven't communicated because it's new information in the last couple days that we've kind of just hammered down. So.
Great, thank you. Sir, that raised your hand earlier, would you like to speak? If you would, you come on up to the mic. Well, you have to come up to the microphone.
No, you can't.
Because of Cat TV. Sorry.
Okay.
People at home won't be able to hear you.
They probably don't want to.
Oh, we do.
No, we do.
So please state your name and your town of residence.
My name's John Ryan. I've lived in Bennington all my life. I haven't heard anything about the trade of the current cafe for the Meals on Wheels to go on here, and Mike sort of got a couple of about the vote, and we were hearing $3 million for this up until about a couple of weeks ago, when all of a sudden it jumped to $9 million. So I guess that's about it.
Okay. I'm wondering, does Meals on Wheels want to respond? Ilse, do you want to speak to that, or who wants to speak to the Meals on Wheels question? Shannon?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the question is. You mean where the cafe would be in Benn High? Was that your question? I wasn't sure.
The trade was
Oh, the trade of the building.
The building where it is now.
Right. Well, that is part of the agreement. The current, where we are right now, for the town to have site control to even do the pre-development work that we've been doing, we have a lease agreement with the current owner, and it's with an option to purchase. So that agreement is that, part of that agreement is that if we were to move forward with this development and this move of the senior center and Meals on Wheels, their exchange would be that he would then take the current senior center, which houses, or the current building which houses the senior center and Meals on Wheels. So that is only going to happen if we proceed with this development. I think that answers. And then, just so that everybody understands, our cost estimates that we have right now for the entire project are in a range from $4 to $9 million. So we think it's going to be somewhere in the middle, and that's what we're working on. I can't.
What's the value of the senior citizens building?
I don't think we want to keep getting into a question answer with me, but I can speak to
Shannon, can you repeat the question?
what the value of the current senior center building, I believe, is about $400,000. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes, James White, please come on.
Nancy White. I would urge everybody to go online and watch the Select Board meeting from December 28th, 2020. That's where the public first started hearing something about the Benn High. Since for the last 18 months, I've tried to get answers and nobody's wanted to talk. Parking will be an absolute nightmare at the Benn High. Everyone involved has known it. That's why they haven't talked about it. They're talking 44 apartments. You've heard about all the different groups and activities. There's only 67 parking spaces. By the time people are in apartments and the people working are there, you're going to be lucky if you have 10 parking spaces to fight over. I don't know about this parking lot at Stewart's because they wouldn't talk about that. It doesn't matter. It's up the street and across the road. Seniors, people with little kids, shouldn't have to be running around Main Street looking for a place to park. So again, they've spent all this time, all this money already, knowing that there isn't even going to be enough parking. I've heard a lot about community partners, nonprofits. I've heard nothing about the citizens, the taxpayers of Bennington. For 45 years, we've owned and paid for that senior building. In addition to that, we fund the budget for the senior center. This is for seniors in Bennington, Old Bennington, and North Bennington. A year ago, Jeannie said it's up to the town of Bennington to provide programming for all seniors in Bennington County. So I haven't heard, is every town in the county going to fund the senior center? Meals on Wheels is funded to deliver food to every town in Bennington County. So that would seem that every town in the county should help pay for the Benn High. And again, it seems that all of these costs are falling to Bennington, but you want all of the towns in the counties and all of the nonprofits to be there. We are going to get hit. This is going to drive up our budget. You haven't talked about funding the YMCA. You haven't talked about things like who's going to pay the heat, who's going to pay the oil. What we heard tonight is totally different from what we were told six months ago. And to the lady who doesn't have information, there's a ton of information. Officials wouldn't answer questions, and they had these plans made last year. So unless citizens want to come in here, and it's got to be more than the same 2 or 3 people all the time, you've got to get the select board to work
Nancy,
with the
you have
public.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. So Jeannie, has every town in Bennington County, have they committed to pay for the senior center?
So Nancy, I'm not sure if you came in late, but the format is that you have 3 minutes to ask your questions, then you sit down, and then the questions are answered by the experts that are here.
Okay, I'll use my last 20 seconds. This is a select board meeting. You're supposed to be working for the public, not just the nonprofits, but for the citizens too. We used to be able to come in here and get an answer. And this nonsense, you've been talking about the Benn High for 2 years. The public is practically in the dark. You wouldn't even post online the purchase to lease contract. Oh, I forgot to mention, over 9,000 voters had their rights violated. Under Vermont law, we were supposed to have 30 days to sign a petition about the senior building. Well, when they held the meeting in March, they never mentioned it. All they did was put the notice in the classified ads of the Bennington Banner.
Your time is up.
Your time is up, Nancy.
Well, I did find out, if you do finalize
Nancy,
this,
your time is up, please.
I want the public to know, if you finalize this, we do have the right under the law to get those 30 days to get the signatures.
Thank you, Nancy. Does anyone want to respond to when the plans were put together, or the number of parking? I'm not sure if Nancy came in late. Maybe she missed the parking. Oh, okay. So you're aware of the parking.
Yeah, so we did discuss in detail the parking plan and our analysis of that. So previously, so I won't readdress that. As far as some of the funding questions, we're going to bring to you the detailed funding sources that we will be securing for this project. So that will answer those questions. The lease contract's been posted online for months. It is now posted again on our Benn High website, so anybody who wants to read that, they can. It's online. As far as the notice of sale regarding the senior center is concerned, we worked with our attorney to post that in accordance with state statute, and we are very confident that we did that appropriately based on the advice of our attorney, who actually drafted the notice and gave us explicit instructions as to how to post them. So we're very confident with that.
Thank you. Sam.
Sam Rustino, Bennington, Vermont. I'm elated at the crowd that we've got here. I wish more people would show up at select board meetings. I'm glad I got you here. I share a lot of information on social media. That's where you guys get your information. You don't read it in the banner. Nobody reads the banner anymore.
Sam, I'm just going to remind you that this is a special meeting on Benn High.
I know, I'm getting to it, okay? This has been a long meeting. I'm following the footsteps of Mike Bethel, all right?
All right,
I've been
and so you also
You're
have 3
interrupting
minutes.
my 3 minutes.
I'm watching it.
I want another 2 minutes.
No,
I'm going for it. We got a horse bet here. And a racing form. And I'd like to know about this racehorse that we're going to bet on. I know what the odds are, $9 million. We got expenditures. We got a sewer project that's going. I don't know if the shovel has been ready yet. Next year, we got County Street. We got Spinelli Field that's going to be working on, another $3 million. What other expenditures that we can afford on this town? We don't have industry in this town. We're an aging town. Can we afford it? And yes, other towns like Pownell and Shasberry and Manchester and New York and Hoosick Falls, they better kick in on this project too. Because we've got a mini Leonard Holden mill that's on this project. You're going to have to hire staff. I got questions. I have questions on asbestos. How much more asbestos has to come out of this building? Do we have a generator on the property? Because you're going to have seniors here. And for the safety of them. I'm a licensed electrician by trade. I know some bit of the trades. We have a lot of trades in town that could be give their input on this. Bennington needs to educate themselves. It saddens me that people weren't here to listen through the whole entire meeting. Educate yourselves, Bennington.
thank you, Sam. Any other questions before we move? Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Lily West Williams now. I am the owner of one of the largest real estate companies in the area. I see firsthand why people come and why people go from this area. I also work, I've worked a client relationship with the Hales in the past and work with a lot of people that are trying to grow and build Bennington. There's a lot of exciting things here. I like the debate. I like to see this whole thing unfold here. What I would like to share is just a quick thing about what I see these people doing. They are working very, very hard and for no pay really to try to improve our town and fill the needs that so many people have voiced. So what I'm hearing is, and what I know is they're working on funding so that it's not on the taxpayer. The other thing is when you have 40 more spaces for people to live, that helps with a lot of different levels of the housing problem. One of the things I just wanted to say is how this is very geared toward our senior population, which is our fastest growing demographic in this area, in the state, and in the country. And what I find, I'm dealing with about a dozen elderly people that need to sell their homes, but they have nowhere to go. And these one-level, accessible, affordable, because they're energy efficient type property, type rental units, they're going to be paying for their rent, and it's going to be a more efficient rent, and that's going to be taxed by the private sector, so that there's going to be more money coming into the town from this, from the taxes that are made from the private sector ownership of this. And so there is a benefit to the town in that way, as well as the way that it's going to help the housing need. The other point I'm going to make is if you have some seniors that can get into these type of rental properties, then we can sell their homes, which are perfect opportunities for these first-time home buyers, these teachers, these people that are in desperate need of housing that they can actually afford to get a mortgage on. The cost to build is skyrocketed. The $250,000 a unit is actually a very good deal.
Lily, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, so my point is I don't really necessarily have a lot of questions because I think they covered a lot, and there's a lot more on the online that answered a lot of my questions. I am in full 100% support of all that you guys are doing, and I want to say appreciate all that you're doing to help the town and the big picture, and I'm sure the parking situation, I have a few ideas for that. So anyway, I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. My name is Heather Starzinski. I'm the Executive Director at NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, in West Rutland, actually. But part of our territory is Bennington County. So we offer services in Addison, Rutland, and Bennington County. And I've worked here for a long time, namely and most recently on rental rehab in the area. Partly with the Hales. And I just want to offer support for what you're saying, which is really a healthy housing market. And we don't have one right now. Here in Rutland, across the state, we do not have a healthy housing market. So someone else mentioned, all housing all the time. That's what we need we all need to be really focused on. And this is the moment. Affordable housing I've been in it for a very long time, and after fighting for 15 years to get everybody to understand what it is, we're finally there. So now is the moment. So I just want to offer the encouragement for you to really think through this project and what's being told to you, as you all are. And if there's any assistance that we can provide, we're happy to do that as well. And the last thing I want to say is we've worked with the Hales for many years now on these rental rehabs across Bennington. And we offer our support for their work, which is quality housing units, safe housing units for community members, and also just the alignment of their values with our values as a nonprofit. I think it's been great to work with them for all these years, and we would just encourage you to consider what they're putting before you and increasing the housing units that are available to your community, and again, creating that healthy housing market that we so desperately need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Hi, my name is Olsa Svoboda. I'm the Executive Director for Meals on Wheels. Who do I pay rent to? Who am I supposed to pay rent to? Because I support the project. However, I am very concerned with the parking. I'm very concerned with the safety. If you come down to Meals on Wheels on any given day, like Mr. Goldstone had said, we do have about 60 to 80 seniors coming in every day. We're filled. We're packed to the brim at Meals on Wheels, as Shannon knows. However, I'm hearing a lot today about housing, and I have to say that, we've been surviving for the last 6 years. When I first got there, we were delivering 400 meals a week. Now we're delivering over 1,000 meals per week, which is over 51,000 a year. We're surviving in our space, but I'm hearing a lot about housing. I am willing to give up the phase 1 of Meals on Wheels so that you can start the phase 2 as the phase 1. So meaning the housing can come first, and then have Meals on Wheels and the senior center come second. Like, we're willing to do, because housing, it sounds like you could get all of the funding, and then, so do the housing first, but please put in senior housing. I have seniors who are waiting 4 years to get a tiny little space. A tiny space. They're not going to be able to afford a lot of the apartments. They're just not. So, their average income is less than $15,000 a year. So my concern is, I am willing, as Meals on Wheels, as part of phase 1, to give up, and I'm sure Carrie would be also back there, that we would be willing to give up the phase 1 of us to then do the housing first, and we'll come second, because we're surviving in our space now. It's only growing, though. It's growing and growing. The senior population is growing. Everybody's aging in place, and we love them. But I'm hearing most of the night about the housing, which is great, but I'm willing to give that part up. Like I'm willing to give phase 1 up if that's what it's going to take to get people housing.
So Ilsa, I think let Shannon respond to that, but you don't have to give it up. So go ahead. Because,
Really?
yes.
I mean, our plan and from the beginning is that phase 1 of the town, which is the senior center and Meals on Wheels, is going to be happening at the same time as the housing. It's not separate. Like, we really are working that this is going to be happening at the same time. So that is our goal. Our sources of funding are actually completely separate. So the town has their funding, the Hales are working on their funding, and there might be some crossover with them helping us through a USCA loan, but we're moving full steam ahead to do this at the same time. And really, that's the most efficient way to do it. So I don't know if you want to speak to that.
I just want to point out too that these projects aren't mutually exclusive. Like the town needs us to do their part, and we need the town to do their part. We've tried to do this without an anchor tenant like the town, and it didn't work out. Now that they're there, it makes it possible for us, and the fact that we're willing to do the other 70 square feet and able to, it makes it possible for them. So these are going to happen at the same time, especially phase 1 of their work and us trying to do the apartments above it. That is like, we're being pressured by the town, which is not normal, because we want to make sure that we're doing that upstairs unit while they're doing their downstairs. So both of these things are happening at the same time, and it's definitely, that has to work that way.
And so the phase 2 of the community piece is the gym, the weight room, it's that other section. So that's phase 2 for the community section. So, yeah. I'm thinking, it's 7:30 now, and I want people to be able to speak individually with the experts that are here tonight. So unless there is some serious burning question, Kat, come on down. Okay, Kat, then after that, and Madison. All right, after that, we will we'll break out into tables, and so any questions that haven't been answered, you can go and ask directly. So please, introduce yourself.
Yeah, we're going to make this efficient by going together. Madison Kramer, I'm the Interim Associate Director for Shires Housing, commuter from Adams, Mass, because lack of housing. I don't have much to add at this hour. I think I'll just echo a lot that has been already said about the housing market and commend Hale Resources and the town for continuing to pursue this really important project and leverage resources for this town. Speaking from experience, accessing LIHTC and other sources for affordable housing is not an easy process and takes a lot of different players and puzzle pieces, and this is not an easy building to develop, otherwise it already would have been done years ago. So again, thank you for continuing this effort, and Kat Breyer's wonderful opportunity for me to introduce her as she just recently signed on and announced as our interim executive director.
Excellent.
So yes, as you're hearing, we're a two-part team representing Shires Housing, but also I'm Kat Breyers. I'm a resident of Bennington. I'm outgoing Director of Planning at the Bennington County Regional Commission. So I have one hat that is my Land Use and Community Development Planner hat, and now incoming Interim Director at Shires Housing and the Housing hat. Whether you're in community development work, which I've been for 6 years in Bennington and the region, or in explicit housing work, it's clear that the message from Bennington and from communities across this region and employers, housing is it. We've heard it multiple times tonight, that housing is the issue. As again, our presenters have made clear, if it were possible to redevelop this legacy building for housing, it would have happened already, and simply the economics of it do not work. So I want to echo something that Mike McDonough, chair of the Bennington Planning Commission, said earlier, which is that we know the future of this building if it doesn't see this kind of serious and partnership-based development. It's that it continues to crumble and be a blight on the community, which drags the ongoing revitalization transportation that Bennington has been seeing for many years, it actually detracts from that, as opposed to this opportunity, which is the other thing I want to echo that Mike said is to keep an open mind. There's a couple of backstop measures in this process. Not all of the answers are here tonight, and I hear from you guys some frustration. Well, we want to know all the answers now. The way these processes work is that you have to go bit by bit, and then you make an investment, you get more answers, and there's a couple of backstops I heard tonight to kind of, as this moves forward, figure out the details. And that's simply how this project goes. But having an open mind, seeing that we know the future of this part of town if it doesn't receive investment, and this is really the investment opportunity that we see to turn this building around and really use it to meet all of these critical needs for the community, I think is so exciting. I could say more, but I know we want to wrap up. And yes, I'll just leave it there. It is really exciting to see everybody here to talk about this project tonight. And I'm really excited. The thrust of it and the way that it meets so many town goals is just really exciting. And I can't wait to see, with these initial steps, all the specifics of how it gets hopefully finalized to be the best facility that it can for the community as a whole.
Thank you both. So what I'd like to do now is, for those of you who who feel like you are ready to leave, I want to thank you so much from all of us on the select board and from our speakers tonight for coming. If you want to stay, we're going to have 3 breakout rooms and breakout tables, and I think Dan is going to tell us where they are. And just so you know, there's some really delicious brownies and cookies over there. Stay around, talk, or grab one on your way out.
So just before we get moving to the tables, just want to point out, so the town will be over here for any community space discussions or anything you want to ask the town. In that back corner, Jeff Goldstone will be there for any design questions. And if you have any questions about the residential project, Zach Hale will be back there in that corner, and we'd love to hear your questions and have a back and forth. I do want to note, I know that Jeannie said this at the beginning, but I think it's important to reiterate, the next meeting at which we will discuss this topic will be on Monday, October 24th, correct, at the regular select board meeting. So more to come, but thank you very much.